Please do sit down. May I welcome you to this service of celebration for the life of Mogg Hercules. Mogg is a force of nature, and we're all here because we love Mogg. We're her family and friends, and we're here to do a number of things. And I'm aware there are children here who maybe have never been to a funeral before, but this is a very special time when we can say our goodbyes, some formal goodbyes to Mogg, but also some thank yous to Mogg for all the things that she has given to us, provided for us, but all that she is. One of the great opportunities that we have this afternoon is to share memories. Some people are going to speak about Mogg, but we all have memories. We all have amazing gifts that Mogg has given to us. And there'll be an opportunity afterwards to share as we talk outside, but also later on as we go to the family home and continue in conversation. So it's an opportunity to have memories and to be thankful for Mogg and her life. But it's also an opportunity to come together and to be friends and support to each other. It's very symbolic that we're gathering together. We're gathering around Abby and Fabian and the family, and we're your extended family this afternoon. And we want to offer our sadness and condolences, but also offer our support and our love in the months and years to come as you grieve the loss of your mum. But it's also an opportunity to come together and to look forward to the future. I'm an ex-parent or alumni parent, I don't know what you call it, of Dallington. I still remember my interview with Mogg. I went smartly dressed in my suit. I didn't realise that was totally unnecessary for the interview. But one of the things that Mogg was very clear with me. I just started here as the vicar of this church, and Mogg said, I don't do God, and I'm not going to teach your children about God. And I said to Mogg, that's fine, that's my job, not yours. And it was a sort of running joke with Mogg over the years, and as we had Evan's funeral here a number of years ago, and Mogg would tease me about that line. And I've been thinking about today and thinking, if I ask Mogg, what do you want to say? Do you want to do God in the service? And I'm sure she'd say, that's your job, Andrew, not mine. So we are going to. We're going to pray, and I'm going to invite you to pray with me later on and look to the hope of the Lord Jesus, who says, I'm the resurrection and the life. So lots of reasons for us gathering together. And as I say, let's use this as an opportunity to be thankful and to focus on those memories, that we can keep those memories alive for many, many years. Just a few practical things about today. After the service, we're going to follow the family outside. And we're going to set off some doves. And after that, the cortege is going to leave to go to the house. We're going to stay around, and there's going to be a book, a memorial book for you to sign outside. So do that after the cortege has gone. And also, if you need the toilet, there are toilets on this level of the church, but also downstairs in the crypt, which you get to by going through the doors on that side of the building, and down the crypt is underneath the church. Other things to say is that a memorial fund has been set up in the memory of Mogg, and the family, Abby and Fabian, are very keen that we're all involved in deciding how those funds are used in the future. So you will be asked to be involved in that decision. But it'd be great if we can launch that fund today. So there will be collection buckets, but there's also ways of giving that are in the service sheet. And just also to say, the wake, the party is at Mogg's home, and that's at 4 p.m. Children are invited, so everyone's warmly invited. There's plenty of room in the garden for everyone, so do come along to that. Well, let's just start with a moment of quiet. Heavenly Father, as we gather this afternoon, we thank you for the life of Mogg, for the love that she showed to each one of us, for all that she is to us, and for the amazing force of nature that she has been, and the influence that she has had on so many lives. And as we gather, we pray that we'll know your peace surrounding our hearts, protecting our thoughts, and that we'll know your future hope. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we're going to stand to sing our opening song, so let's stand.
I always knew I'd get the early billing. Anyway, thank you, those of you who are here for the rehearsal. I'm sorry it's taken 12 years. Well done for coming back. I'm going to have to read most of this, I'm afraid, so if I start going into a kind of teachery thing, you'll just have to put up with it. Mogg was indeed a difficult person to represent. Not least because so many people have their own extraordinary stories of how Mogg changed their lives as teachers, parents, and children across generations. Moreover, despite a full life of travel, love and adventure, Mogg's enduring passions were relatively few. There was Evan, the love of her life, her children, her brothers and their families, teaching, hypochondria, wearing black, and being right all the time. It is true that her husband most definitely loved her. Her children love her. Her brothers love her. Most of us have learned something from her. She was undeniably ill. We're mostly dressed in black. And she got the last word. Almost. Mogg was born Maureen Constance Atkin on the 2nd of April 1939 to Charles Atkin and Constance Atkin in Worksop, Nottinghamshire. We always imagined that Connie, her mum, had Romany blood in her. She would as soon read your palm as read the expression on your face, and could read your fortune with playing cards or tarot. Charlie swept her off her feet and courted her on his BSA. He had apprenticed as a bricklayer, and the career kept him out of the mines and would eventually enable him to forge a career as a builder in Australia. Meantime, the family grew to 3 children. Mogg's brothers are Stuart and Richard, born in the middle and a couple of years after the war. Charlie fought through Sicily, Italy and Northern Europe. Disgruntled by many of the post-war decisions in England, especially around shipping bricks to Europe, Charlie decided to take his family for a new start in Australia. As £10 poms, they arrived by ship in Melbourne on the first Tuesday in November, 70 years ago this year. The arrival date was never forgotten by any of the family members, as it was Melbourne Cup Day and everything in the city was closed. When they managed to make their way to Mount Waverley, they discovered that the small neighbourhood was populated with British migrants and surrounded by fields. From the industrial Midlands, Mogg now lived in the semi-rural outskirts of a growing city. And as my Uncle Stuart put it, there was nothing there. By the time she returned to Australia, married to Evan, then with Evan, Abby and me, the city had grown out to encompass Mount Waverley. We struggled to imagine the area without the endless suburban closes, long avenues, local news agencies selling malted milks. Now the freeways carry you further and faster through the old suburbs and on into the new. Charlie founded his own building company, and when they were old enough, Stuart and Richard joined the business, working with their dad until he retired and then carrying on the business themselves. Mogg, of course, did not go into her father's business. 1950s Australia was quite traditional, of course, even if her family wasn't. But even if she had wanted to join her brothers, Mogg's path had always been her own. Her powerfully strong will was already much in evidence. She was well known for organising trips to the cinema for all the kids in the area, the younger and the older kids. Deciding to become a teacher was no surprise to her mum or dad. Nevertheless, Mogg's experience at school was by no means perfect. She often spoke of the chemistry teacher who threw her out of the class for being too lively. Mogg thought this was unfair because she was just beginning to learn something. But her biggest bugbear was the fact that she had no gold stars on the star chart in the classroom. Mogg decided that this was unfair and liberated a couple of stars from her classmates to go next to her own name. Inevitably, she was found out and received punishment rather than understanding. These 2 stories were often used to help us and other children whenever we encountered the brutal efficiency of school systems to make us feel undervalued. I often imagine that she decided at this time to become a teacher and do what she could to prevent this happening to others. Mogg attended Mac Robertson's School in Melbourne. On her own CV from the mid-70s, she lists her A-levels: English literature, English expression, German, French, biology, art and history, but neglects to mention that she had a scholarship and even that it is a single-sex school. The Mac Robertson Girls' High School is as prestigious now as it was then. Their motto, Poten Sui, or Mastery of Self, is, despite Mogg's own stories of her school experiences, entirely appropriate and suggests that as a Macrob, Mogg would have excelled. The Urban Dictionary website gives an end-stating definition of the macrob as the smartest, most well-educated ladies in Melbourne who are often found in high concentrations around Domain Tram Interchange or Flinders Street Station on their mobiles with the following usage: "OMG, don't be such a macrobian," or "You're such a typical macrob chick." Mogg, however, was not typical. From school she went to Burwood Teachers College in Melbourne, also known as Frobel. Her CV claims that she completed a 3-year full-time teacher training course from 1955 to 57. You can see the problem there, obviously. It is odd to see a mistake of that kind of thing on a crucial document from Mogg, but it was easily explained. The core course, according to the Teachers College Handbook from 55, was 2 years only, and then you had a specialist year. So she chose to train to work in special schools. As to, in order to prepare herself for teacher training, she had been a trainee at Oakley Spastics Society School for Children, also in Melbourne. The handbook also states, "It has been a basic principle of educational administration in Victoria that the schools of the rural communities should be as well served as the schools of the cities. To this end, all students at the completion of the primary course are expected to take positions in small schools in various parts of Victoria." So Mogg was sent off to the bush. And she found herself working as the only teacher in a school in a small town in the southwest of Melbourne called Bessie Bell, which took its name from 2 dairy cows, Bessie and Bell. Mogg's CV explains, "From 1957 to 59, I was head of a rural kindergarten responsible for 40 children aged 4.5 to 6. You can imagine how difficult it would be to describe these experiences for the understanding of a future employer in a London school." Mogg drove to this first appointment in her first car. Anecdotally, Mogg used to refer to it as an old Fiat 500. In reality, it was the 1957 new model, which she had brought in hire purchase. We partly know this because she would make use of her younger brother Stuart's keenness to drive her car. Mogg would apparently promise him a go, but only if he gave her some money for the petrol. Of course, once the tank was full, Stuart was given the privilege of driving home from the garage, only to be dropped by Mogg before she headed out. He has admitted that the trick worked more than once. Mogg would go on to have great fondness for small cars, which were designed to survive in rural conditions. In the 70s, she drove an Austin A30, followed by a fleet of Renault 5s, brown, blue and black. These were the cars of the school run, and there are people here who would have ridden to Crow Western in at least one of them. In the 80s, Mogg went through her boy racer phase and drove a Ford Fiesta XR2. Although not likely to be done for speeding, she adored the rapid acceleration, the noise of the engine, and the double take as she powered along Boswell Road, hand on wheel, cigarette on fingers. In Bessie Bell, Mogg's love for teaching only strengthened, but having served out her commitment to Victorian rural schools, she returned home to Melbourne, Mount Waverley and her family. Apart from her belongings, she brought with her a goose, a goat and some chickens. The goat and the chickens survived the first night, but Charlie and Uncle Cyril prepared the goose for the pot. 59 to 60 found Mogg on a full-time course at Melbourne Technical College, getting a secondary arts and crafts teacher certificate, and afterwards, in 61, she spent 6 months on part-time in-service training for teaching English as a foreign language, whilst teaching a group of 20 non-English speaking children, mostly, according to her CV, originally from Southern Europe. She doesn't name the school in her CV, but labels it as an urban state school. And Mogg's next post was a full-time supply teacher in South London as of June 61. Something big had happened in her life. Whilst at Melbourne Technical College, she had fallen in love. I must emphasise that this was about the same time that she taught herself to smoke, but it is not tobacco I'm talking about, but definitely. A love she was truly never able to give up. He, like Mogg, had followed a commitment to teach linked to the Victorian State's funding of his painting degree. Unlike Mogg, he didn't like teaching and often ran away to work in theatre groups in Ballarat and Bendigo. Coincidentally, he nevertheless did teach technical drawing at Waverley High around 1960 and had a certain Richard Atkin, Mogg's youngest brother, in his class. I'm not aware that Mogg ever used this for leverage. Evan had been offered a scholarship to the State School of Art in London to study for a Master's in Theatre Design, and so he left. Mogg followed him. I can only imagine what it would have been like for her arriving off the boat and being met by him after their relatively brief separation, but it must have been joyful. Connie and Charlie, Stuart and Richard were extremely sad to see Mogg go, but her will was indomitable. As a teenager, only a few years before, she had argued with her mum, Connie, about having her hair cut short. This involved removing the hair, which was carefully plaited for school. Mogg ran out and simply had the plaits cut off. She presented this trophy of defiance to her mother, who kept them all her life, and Mogg received them back, perfectly preserved after her death. And they gave her back the money they'd been taking from her as rent to help her fund her way. By July 61, Mogg's Australian qualifications had been verified in London and she was settled and teaching in schools in South London. By New Year's Eve 61, Mogg's family received the news that Mogg had married that day. The event took place at the Fulham Registry Office and they went to the pub afterwards, minus the best man who had run off with someone new. The telegram simply said, "Got married, not shotgun, love Mogg." By 62, Mogg was teaching at Overhill Secondary Girls' School in Battersea. In this part of her professional life, she was mainly teaching art and art history at secondary level. Passionate about her students, she forced her school to allow the school leavers she was teaching to study English O-level, while she also taught them art A-level. Without the O-level, they would struggle to complete the course, but for Mogg it was a Trojan horse to force the school to allow them to do the O-level and improve their employment chances. Mogg often talked about teaching in gritty situations in London's East End. But that would come later, and she worked exclusively in gritty situations in London's South and West. She often claimed that she had taught Cat Stevens art in this period of her career. We believed her. Mogg's CV states, from 1966 to 72, there was a break for domestic reasons, brackets, 2 children. Mogg and Evan adopted me in 1966 and Abby in 69. Evan was working for the BBC, having finished his postgraduate, and Mogg stayed at home to look after us. The arrival of the children in their lives forced them to consider whether they could or should stay in London. And they made several trips back to Melbourne when we were small, stayed for 6 months when Abby was a baby, and then again when we were a little older. I have strong memories of the trips, the smells, the sounds, and the feel of Melbourne persists from early on. Age 4, I had a blue pedal car, which I called Speedy, and I can clearly remember that it felt as if we had settled rather than gone on holiday. London beckoned, we returned. We stayed in a modern house in a terrace infield opposite Victoria Park. Connie and Charlie came to stay. Connie also came with Auntie Edna, and Uncle Richard and Auntie Sandra lived locally in Stoke Newington at the time. Looking after me and giving Mogg time to care for Abby. Mogg always said that before we came into her life, she thought that she understood children. But having her own changed the way she understood much of the theory underpinning the pedagogy she had studied at university and college. She would often use examples of her own learning from being a parent to describe these changes. For someone with such a strong will of her own, she was yet surprised to encounter the strong wills of 2 young personalities. Once, after I dropped the house keys down an expansion grate in the kitchen floor 3 times, Mogg lost her temper, and I received a smack on my leg. While I'm telling this story, Mogg would try to replicate the look of disbelief that apparently I wore on my face as I looked up at her and said, "Don't hurt my skin." This was the kind of experience which Mogg had with Abby and me, which forced her to see the world from a children's perspective. And because she was so emotionally close to us, she could more easily enter it with us and more easily understand our childhood logic. At age 4, with Abby barely just a bit past 1, I suppose, I was diagnosed with cancer. Much as I may have talked about the trauma of illness in my childhood, I was blissfully unaware of the severity of the situation most of the time, at least the ramifications on my own life expectancy. Of course, our parents were not. Although I had been treated and discharged by the time I was 6, the anxiety did not go away, and the fight to get the best treatment for me must have left Mogg exhausted. I remember that she always made time for both of us, for Abby and me, and did not allow the long hours in hospital to take her away from playing with us. By the time I was 6 and Abby was 3, Mom was back at work, albeit part-time. According to her CV, she had a responsibility for a planned remediation programme with children aged 6 to 8 whose learning disabilities and behavioural problems were wide-ranging. During this time, Mogg also qualified as a remedial teacher, focusing on problems with children with specific reading and spelling difficulties. Mogg had by now identified my dyslexia and had begun to see the bigger issue in her school experiences. This was one of the most challenging periods in her life. With 2 children, she was trying to return to work and change her educational focus. At the same time, she was still dealing with the consequences of my illness. As luck would have it, we were all in the same school, William Tyndale. Abby in the nursery, me in the infants, and Mogg on the staff. We moved to be closer, swapping Gore Road and Victoria Park for Canterbury Road and Islington. During our time at Tyndale, the school went through one of the worst modern education crises in London. What were laudable educational ideals were applied in dysfunctional and damaging ways, leaving many students, staff and parents quite distressed. Abby came running home from school aged 3. She was upset because when the school's inspector came to visit, her teacher had laid out lots of activities for the children. Abby, being one of the most reliable kids, was asked by the teacher which game she wanted to play. Abby said none of them. The teacher said that Abby should try one of them. Abby replied that she had already completed all of them. The teacher said, "No, Abby, surely you can see that these are new games." "They're the same," replies Abby, "and you've just changed which table you put them on." The teacher was not happy, nor was Mogg. Mogg and Evan went to Tyndale after school for a parent conference and found me in a headlock as a much older child bashed my head against a concrete wall. For many years, this moment symbolised the impact of the failing system and poor choices by the senior staff. But I, throughout, only considered the negative effect on Abby and me and the other children. Even more years later, via a conversation with a tutor during teacher training for secondary, it dawned on me that we were all being bullied in different ways. The Inner London Education Authority did not treat the whistleblowers well, and gagging orders were served for anyone who wished to carry on teaching in the state system in London. The last entry in Mogg's CV describes her work at Ecclesbourne Infant School, where she ran a language lab and a remedial reading centre. She worked with children who were non-English speaking, all of whom had reading behavioural problems, according to her CV. Having moved to Canterbury School on Highbury Corner, myself, I remember visiting Mogg there at the end of term lunch. They had strawberries and cream, and she was a lot happier. Abby went on to an independent girls' school, and I think Mogg and Ev were hoping it would give her the opportunities to learn that Tyndale didn't. But it didn't. Instead, they corrected her when she fell on the playground on a climbing frame. "What's wrong, Abigail?" "I fell on the climbing frame and banged my vagina." "Oh my word! You mustn't call it that. Call it your wee-wee." Mogg had had enough, and an idea was forming. Mogg's CV was used to get her a job in the independent sector at a school called the Children's House, which at the time was housed at St Stephen's Church Annex off Canterbury Road. This was a school which began as a child-centred, parent-run and governed Montessori nursery and was expanding when Mogg joined. I remember Mogg talking a lot about Montessori theory and practice at the time, and she certainly took a lot from this. But she'd been taking courses and retraining even when she was working at Tyndale, and took from Montessori, Steiner and Froebel without being a slave to their theories, without being literal. As you've probably guessed, this was the last CV Mogg wrote in order to secure a new employment. As her next job, she created herself. By the time Dannington School opened on the 13th of April 1978, much had been happening in the building to get it ready. In her own writing, Mogg mentions the slop bins, dusting the cobwebs and painting the walls. But the job that she was perfectionist about was what she referred to as banging, or the process of chipping off all the paint on the stairs with a hammer and a paint scraper. We took it in turns because the noise could echo in deafening levels. We wore protective goggles. From the basement to where upper nursery is now, the stairs were chipped clean. I think Mogg wanted to get away from that institutional look and feel. After all, that was the look of the majority of the schools in Islington, still housed in Victorian splendour. And Mogg had been forced out of that orthodoxy and was yearning to create something new. I was at school in Old Street at Central Foundation in my first year in secondary. Abby left Prior Western and joined Darlington. The size of the class, then the number of the classes, then the year groups and the number of teachers and assistants and specialist teachers, music, French, recorder, singing. It carried on growing. New floors, new activities, new personalities, new projects, fresh ideas and events, and yet the same ethos. In fact, the ethos was infectious. Even more than the lovely children, many Darlington teachers I met over the years shared Mogg's ambition to create something new. But what was so new about it? After all, many of the theories weren't new and had been were written into the Plowden Report, which was published in '67, which in turn had influenced what had happened at Tyndale. There were three significant factors. Firstly, the school had grown to a reasonable size. All the teachers sat around a table together at lunch and sometimes before and after school. They chatted, they marked, drank coffee, smoked loads of cigarettes, leafed through copies of junior education and tests. They shared their ideas, discussed them, modified them, and changed them. Secondly, Mogg understood that children learn at different rates, in different ways and with different skill sets. She still expected her group to complete tasks at roughly the same time, but she was comfortable with selecting a task from the many within a project and tailoring it to fit the moment or the person. Learning with Mogg also meant tasks like curve stitching, knitting, embroidery, drawing, collage, printing, painting. She understood that drawing could be a means of improving handwriting, or knitting depended on practical maths, and that any skill you could be proud of built confidence. Thirdly, Mogg taught by example. Her project ideas were rich and multi-layered, and she invested a great deal of time into research. She really understood the content she was teaching. And even more than this, her notion of assessment was that it should be incorporated into a project. And why are you doing this? She would ask a member of her group as they had held up a project book to show her. Is it just to make you clever? Even before I taught at Darlington myself, I knew the answers to these questions. As a visitor to her classroom or as a teacher in the school, I could hear the answers in my head, the ones she was hoping to hear. I'm finding out about... What's another word for finding out? Investigate? Good. And what are you investigating? I'm investigating Victorian inventions. Now you are making me clever. Mogg's great trick was to make you feel you were teaching her. As a student, as a teacher, even as a son. And just like a tutor I'd had at Goldsmiths who used to insist, why teach? At times when you either didn't expect it or didn't want to hear it, Mogg's verbal challenges constantly reminded you that you needed to know why you were doing what you were doing, which in turn reminded you of the importance of choice. When I went to interview for my first job after Goldsmiths, I was asked, why teach? I didn't just have one answer. And Mogg had the same effect on her students. They could not just do the paper, but the interview as well. Sadly, this could also mean that transferring to another school could leave former pupils facing the kind of teaching which Mogg despised, where the narrowness of a curriculum or subject knowledge left questions discouraged as if they were not part of the lesson plan, where learning was determined by the lesson objectives, where the unexpected was not valued. As Darlington thrived, Mogg thrived, and the two entities fed off each other. The furniture that Evan had siphoned off 1,000 film sets was slowly replaced with fitted shelving. The bander machine, which kept generations of staff amused and children slightly light-headed, became a photocopier and then a network printer copier. The second-hand school chairs and tables which we bought and brought back on the roof rack from the reclamation yard in Romford were replaced with new bespoke school furniture. Working with Mogg was always stimulating, entertaining, and sometimes frustrating. Stimulating was watching and listening to her teaching maths or discussing the idea for a project or going to a conference or inset training. Entertaining was her sense of humour. often attempting to shock with how close to the bone she was willing to go, and even more hilarious, how she would try and wriggle out of being caught telling a lie by blatantly changing the subject. Frustrating could be being stopped as you are mid-sentence beginning a carefully prepared lesson to hear, "Oh, didn't I tell you we've got visitors this morning?" Helpfully, this could be the announcement that you're about to have a special guest, or an ex-pupil, a new teacher. One time we had one of Picasso's models, the community police officer, or a theatre workshop. Also frustration could be Mogg's approach to taking classroom breaks, often linked to a process of finding Mogg when you're actually needing her for your own break. At best, Mogg's breaks were 10 minutes visit to her office, before legislation drove her outside to steps on a certain doorway in Parkin Street. At worst, it could lead to an absence of up to an hour. This wouldn't affect the children in the class per se, but trying to have your own break would become more complicated. And where was Mogg? Well, having visited her office, she might go off to the lab to avoid signing the letters which Maria Louisa prepared for her, off to lower nursery to see a new pupil, therefore conveniently avoiding Vanessa, who will be trying to track her down to do next year's class lists, back in middle school to avoid any of the above. I can't do it now, I've got to let Fabian have his break. Mum, I've had a break, it's okay. Oh well, I've just got to go up to transition. By lunchtime, everyone would have tracked her down and press-ganged her into signing, deciding, okaying and conferring. And secretly, we knew she loved this game. It's safe to say that by the time the school had matured, after about 10 years of being open, Mogg really treated it as her third child. Abby and I were quite grown up by this time. Evan's career was successful and busy. The school was now the object of all her love and obsession. What had been driven into existence by her will and her desire to create a little bit of Paulo Ferreira in North London became something new and has been renewed with each fresh personality, young and old. It is fair to say that at different times in our adult lives, the new kid in the family tended to get all our mother's attention. It consumed her time, and although her passion for Darlington is something that we never tried to curb, she had to be reminded by Evan and friends to step outside. Gardening was a lifelong hobby. The trips to sporting events with her great friend Jill Wells, where they would listen to the crack of a ball on Willow, straw sipping from cartons of orange topped up with vodka, were her favourite. I remind myself that this child which she nurtured grew up in a large family of teachers, teaching assistants, lunch ladies, friends of Darlington, parents and pupils. And through Mogg we are all related. Long may she continue to make us clever. Thank you.
What good is sitting alone in your room? Come hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. Put down the knitting, the book and the broom. It's time for a holiday. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. Come taste the wine. Come hear the band. Come blow your horn, start celebrating. Right this way, your table's waiting. What good's permitting some prophet of doom to wipe every smile away? Life is a cabaret, old chum. So come to the cabaret. I used to have this girlfriend known as Elsie, with whom I shared 4 sordid rooms in Chelsea. She wasn't what you'd call a blushing flower. As a matter of fact, she rented by the hour. The day she died, the neighbors came to snicker. Well, that's what comes from too much pills and liquor. But when I saw her laid out like a queen, she was the happiest corpse I'd ever seen. I think of Elsie to this very day. I remember how she turned to me and say, what good is sitting all alone in your room? Come, hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. And as for me, I made my mind up back in Chelsea. When I go, I'm going like Elsie. Start by admitting from cradle to tomb, it isn't that long a stay. Life is a cabaret, old chum. It's only a cabaret, old chum. And I love a
I was a pupil at Darlington from the age of 3-4 until 11. I left in 1988, so a little while ago. And I encountered many other educational institutions since then, experiences, and met many people in my life. But the adult that I became was largely down to Darlington, to Mogg. I often tell people that I was raised by two people, my mother and my head teacher, Mogg. Mogg is the person that told me and made me believe that I can do anything. And I remember her words so clearly. She said to me, "Darling, if there is something you want in life and it doesn't exist, you simply create it." I didn't realise it at the time, but that one statement shaped a fundamental part of my character. Mogg also taught me to be kind to people, to be courageous, and to embrace our uniqueness. In essence, just be you. Any time I have not stayed true to being me is the time I falter in life. And I faltered many, many times. But even as I faltered as an adult, Mogg's words helped to pick me up. When I decided to leave my marriage, leave New York, and come back to London with two children, aged 1 and 2 years old, I felt like the biggest failure. I felt immense guilt. I couldn't forgive myself. And it wasn't until I spoke to Mogg and she shared with me her thoughts on the situation that I was then able to accept my situation, embrace my unique journey, and embrace what I knew was going to be a very challenging road ahead. But her words gave me the courage and confidence to start that journey and start healing. So as a child, even as a grown woman, she has always been there for me. Her words have always helped shape the direction that I would take in life. What she has taught me, I teach my own children, and they recognise the importance of Mogg. They know that when I say to them, "Baby, you can do anything you want in life, as long as it comes from a place of good intention," they know that lesson comes from Mogg. For that reason, my son, now aged 11 years old, today, he asked me if I could say a goodbye on his behalf when I speak about Mogg, and to say, "Mogg, thank you." Mogg was my head teacher, and she was my teacher, my life teacher. And I've stayed in touch with several friends from Darlington, and I know the impact that she had on them too. One of my friends who couldn't be here today, her mother became a head teacher too, because she had such great admiration for Mogg and literally wanted to follow in her footsteps. Mogg inspired so many of us. I also have a great memory of my mum and Mogg smoking a cigarette together and drinking coffee in the staff room. School was certainly different at Darlington, but you know what I learned? Different isn't just okay, it's more than okay, because I learned that you can do anything. And from the bottom of my heart, I will thank Mogg for that lesson every single day of my life.
I'll get this right in a minute. Oh, good man. Justin, is it on?
It's on, yeah.
On? What a task. Following those two. Right, here we go. Short and sweet. Right. Way back in 1978, I was a swim teacher for the schools at Ironmonger Road, Baths. I'd just finished my lesson when I received a tap on my shoulder. I turned round, looked down, and there she was. She said to me, "My name is Mogg Hercules, and I own a school, and I'd like you to work for me." Back then, I thought she must have searched half of London to find the best teacher possibly for her school. But in retrospect, she just crossed Goswell Road, and there I was. I think I started the following week, and in my mind, I felt I was working for a very bright, posh lady who owned her own school. Very quickly, I found she had a great sense of humour, and without a doubt, the most dedicated teacher I ever met. At first, this East End boy was a little intimidated by her being the owner of the school, that I almost stood to attention whenever I spoke to her. This reverence was very short-lived, until a few weeks later I was brave enough to answer her with a sarcastic remark on something we were discussing. To which she replied with a copy of my own East End accent with something like, "Why don't you just go away?" To which we both laughed. It made me realise this woman could shoot me down in flames any time she wanted to. From that very day, I was so very proud and happy to work for this lovely lady. I stayed for 30 years. During those many years, I witnessed a brilliant, dedicated teacher that her pupils and staff adored. The week before she died, I went to see her at the hospital and was able to tell her how much the staff and myself loved her and appreciated the special person she was after all those many years. Excuse me. To finish, I would like to say thank you, Mogg, for that tap on the shoulder all those years ago. God bless Dave.
Brilliant teaching is the most important activity in the world, and that's because a teacher's results remain alive long after the teacher themselves has left the stage. I first heard of Mogg when my elder daughter, Pinny, was born. It was Christmas 1978, when a friend said, "There's a school just opened down in Clerkenwell. You might want to put Pinny's name down for it." "Oh yes, where is it? What's it called?" "Dallington, after the street it's on." Well, I knew that street, if not the school, because I had a studio just around the corner in Berry Street in those days. And I had been wondering what those small school crocodiles of just 9 children were all about, and now I knew. You'd like the people running that school form. Oh, why? Because they are an artist and a teacher. They're from Australia, Melbourne, Evan and Mogg Hercules. Mogg used to teach in a sanctuary in Hackney, I think, and before that, Aboriginal kids in the outback. Mogg? Mogg? Okay, what else? Well, the what else is that Mogg doesn't just teach the kids, but she also teaches them to question and challenge what she's actually teaching them. She doesn't talk down to them either. She gets a really good dialogue going. She listens to what they have to say, and she then takes what they have to say seriously. They love her, absolutely. Wow, I thought. It sounds like the best of the 1960s art college, with teachers like Richard Hamilton and Eduardo Palozzi, who had students such as Brian Ferry, the Beatles, and even me. So it's no surprise at all that since Dallington started, many successful artists, designers, musicians, architects and creative people generally have trusted their kids to Mogg and to Dallington. I sent all 3 children here, and although George, the youngest, now nearly 25, is currently in India and he sends his love to you all, both Pinny and Hattie are here today. Mogg had a knack of yoking things together that were at face value odd bedfellows, paradoxical, contradictory even. Rather like an artist or a scientist. She could then make them add up to more than the sum total of the parts. And in that sense, she was a great artist or scientist herself, and Dallington was her living artwork or scientific construction. So here is a Mogg creative paradox. Mogg encouraged all her charges to be individuals who believed in themselves, who expressed themselves convincingly, and stood up strongly for what they believed. But at the same time, she taught them to think of others before themselves, to see things from another's point of view, to support another's right to an opinion, whether they agreed personally with that opinion or not. It was all heady stuff, and it is embodied, of course, in the Dallington motto, which is value your own worth and understand the difference in others. Mogg was mercurial, entertaining, annoying, and brilliant. She hated identikit people. She had little time for the wishy-washy, with few opinions of their own. She loved difference, and so she encouraged the children she taught to challenge and to know joy. A teacher at Westminster School once said to me, "You can always pick out a Dallington kid. They're a joy to teach, even though their favourite word seems to be why." Mogg was devastated when Evan died. He was her life partner, the guy, as we've heard, who she followed from Australia to England. Evan was her rock and she his. Together they were equal partners in the running of the Dallington enterprise. But when he passed, Mogg, with great courage, continued with Dullington with at least as much energy and strength of purpose as before, all in the face of her own serious illness. As governors, it is our responsibility to ensure that Dullington continues with at least as much energy and strength of purpose as before. Believe me, we will do this. Mogg's legacy and spirit, which is embodied in her unique approach to teaching and learning, will live on in Dullington, no question about it. New teachers will continue to be mentored by teachers experienced in the Dullington way, and Dullington's super teaching projects will continue to flourish. That unique vitality, individuality, joy and strength of purpose, forever embodied in the Dullington alumnus, will live on. Which brings me back to where I started. The results of a brilliant teacher's work remains long after that teacher has themselves left the stage. Down the road from here is a rather large cathedral. Its architect was Sir Christopher Wren. Although he's buried in there, visitors may be a bit disappointed not to find a great big memorial to him. But then they may come across a small inscription on the floor of the crypt. It is an inscription that could be applied to Mogg, but in Mogg's case, not to a building, but to those whose lives she touched. So here goes. Mogg Hercules, MBE, teacher extraordinary. Should you seek her memorial, just look around you. Thank you.
It's early in the morning, about 2:45. I'm sitting here talking with my baby over cigarettes and coffee. And to tell you that, dog, I've been so satisfied. Honey, since I've met you, baby, since I've met you, oh, places that I've been around, and all the good-looking girls I've met, they just don't seem to fit in. No, in this particular set, yeah. But it seems so natural, darling, that you and I are here, just talking over cigarettes and drinking coffee. You know, my heart cries out, love that last I found you. Won't you let me just build my whole life around? And well, how complete my whole life would be, yeah, if you would take things under consideration and walk down this aisle with me. I would love it, yeah. Well, I say it's so early in the morning. Ooh, it's 2:45. We're sitting here talking cigarettes and drinking coffee, that Lord. And I'd like to show you where I've known nothing but good old joy since I met you, darling. Honey, since I met you, baby, yeah. I would love to have another drink of coffee now. And please, darling, help me smoke just one more cigarette now. I don't want no cream and sugar, 'cause I got you now, darling. But just let me enjoy, help me to enjoy this good time that we'll have, man. It's so early in the morning, so early in the morning, and I got you, and you got me, and we have each other, and we don't want nothing but joy, no, nothing but joy.
Pass It On by Nicky Hetherington, an Aboriginal poet from New South Wales. Before it's gone, remind me. Show me where the wild flowers grow. Teach me our stories from long ago. Who made the sunrise? Where does the moon go? Walk me back to the land that owns me, through the trees that know my name, the animals, plants, and birds, we are but the same. On the dust of our earth, lay me down. I am home again. listen very carefully, because there will be a test to follow. We're not here to have fun, Miss Hercules. We're here to learn. Oh, I need my glasses. A Guide to Education by Michael Rosen. You get education in schools. To find out how much education you get, the government gives you tests. Before you do the tests, the government likes it if you're put on different tables that show how well or how badly you're going to do in the tests. The tests test whether they've put you on the right table. The tests test whether you know what you're supposed to know. But don't try to get to know any old stuff like what's earwax or how to make soup. The way to know things you're supposed to know is to do pretend tests. When you do a pretend test, you learn how to think in the way that tests want you to think. And the more practice you do, the more likely it is that you won't make the mistake of thinking in any other way other than in the special test way of thinking. Here's an example. The apples are growing on the tree. What is growing on the tree? If you say leaves, you're wrong. It's no use you thinking that when apples are on a tree, there are usually leaves on a tree too. There is only one answer, and that is apples. All the other answers are wrong. If you are the kind of person who thinks that leaves is a good answer, doing lots and lots and lots of practice tests will get you to stop thinking that leaves is a good answer. Doing many practice tests will also make it very likely that there won't be time for you to go out and have a look at an apple tree to see what else grows on apple trees, like ants, mistletoe. Education is getting much better these days because there's much more testing. So remember, it's apples, not leaves.
Maybe not. Multitasking? Not possible. Shabtis. Does anyone have any shabtis to offer to Mogg? Because this is the time to put them in the basket for Mogg. Thank you. Cue the music.
should be somewhere in the line. These three have to be together.
As Mogg's niece, I grew up on the other side of the world. Mogg was a hugely figure that was almost like a fairy tale. My grandparents would come over to visit, and they'd come back talking about how wonderful Mogg was. Fred and Abby had come over with Evan and Mogg, and we'd have holidays together, and it was, even though we've lived apart most of our lives, it's like we've always been together. But most recently, in probably the last 5 years or so, I and my family have had the most wonderful time getting to know Mogg, for me as an adult, and for my children, my 2 daughters and my husband to know who Mogg is. Her wit, her candour, her ability to steer a conversation the right way, what she taught my children playing in her backyard was just something that we will carry with us forever. My daughter Phoebe, she's 20, got to spend a fabulous time last year with Mogg, and she talks about her mornings when Mogg was not at school on a Wednesday, and she got to spend times with her in the morning. And she and my other daughter and myself have had an incredible role model in Mogg. The best compliment, or one of the best compliments I've ever had in my life, was when I brought a friend over to Mogg's house one day in London, and when we were leaving to come home, she said, "Kaz, now I get how you fit in your family and where you come from." And that was one of the best moments of my life. Thank you.
So these are going to be read together. We can just take them each.
Olivia Garton, who was a former pupil with her twin sister Virginia from the 1980s. I am so pleased that after many years I got to see Mogg in January last year to celebrate her MBE. What an incredible achievement by Mogg, and it was special to be part of that wonderful evening. The photo that Virginia and I managed to have taken with Mogg is more treasured now. Dallington was a very special place for me, as it was such a happy place to go to and a happy start to my education. It didn't feel like school for me. It would not have been as special as it was if it wasn't for Mogg. I remember she was always so welcoming, always had a smile on her face, and took a huge interest in everyone. I have a lot of happy memories of the school. I thank you, Mogg, for the wonderful school that you provided. Thank you, and love from Olivia. Oh, and Olivia's sister, Virginia King, has written this. I was very sad to hear this, and am very sorry for your loss. Mogg was one of a kind, a true legend, and it is impossible to put into words how extremely grateful my parents and I are that she set up Dallington. My twin sister and I joined Dallington in 1981. As sad as I was to hear of Mogg's passing, I am as glad that I managed to see her in January last year at the celebration of her being awarded an MBE. I remember joking with her that in March she would be at Buckingham Palace and I would be giving birth to my second child. Little did I know that it would happen on the same day. I am very sorry that I'm unable to attend the funeral on Friday. I have no doubt it will be a wonderful celebration of Mogg's life. If you would like to include a word or two from me at the funeral, here we are. To me, Mogg was Dallington, so it seems very fitting to sum up my time at Dallington using the 4 letters of her name. Magical, outstanding, glorious, gratifying. My thoughts are with you all during this difficult time. Long may Dallington live. And this is from their mum, and she is Nella Jameson. Like Olivia, I am so sorry I can't be there, but I'm so grateful to you for being in touch.
I am sad not to have seen any of you for so long. I will always be so grateful to Mogg and you, Vanessa, for your incredible support and friendship all those years ago. Vanessa was our deputy head for many years, and I trust is here. I clearly remember Mogg's advice about choosing the next school for the twins. Wait till the very end of your visit, when you have seen all you want to see. Then tell the headmistress about them. Look her in the eye and see if she flinches. Brilliant advice. What a legend she was.
Andrea Lambell. Andrea was a music and singing teacher early on at Dallington. She's now a song and music writer, has composed for films and performs at weddings and special events. I formed my love of teaching music through Mogg and Dallington. She gave me my first break after graduation. I will always remember her creativity, inspirational leader, and most importantly, her wicked sense of humour. Rest in peace, Mogg. You were a true legend. This is from Annette Albuquerque, a teacher from the 1980s to 1993. Mogg employed me as a nursery teacher at Dallington School for 7 diverting and instructive years, back in the mists of time. Here are 7 things I learned from Mogg. Number 1, trust your instincts. Number 2, what the hell were you thinking? Number 3, speak your mind. Number 4, shut up. Number 5, just do it. Number 6, stop. Number 7, be kind. Thank you, Mogg. I won't forget. Love, Annette.
Christine Davison, who's a very long-serving nursery teaching assistant at Dallington. I had been a student at Dallington training for my NNEB, and then Vanessa wrote a letter and put it through my mum's door, asking me to get in touch because a position for a teaching assistant's job had just come up. So I rang the school and I was asked to come in for a formal interview with Mogg. I arrived and Mogg asked me to put the kettle on, which I did and made the coffee. My nerves were going through the roof, waiting to be asked questions in my formal interview. So Mogg and I sat around the kitchen table and started chatting. And then she just looked at me and asked whether I wanted the job or not. And that was it. I took the job.
This one's from Robin Kane, who's also a teacher. Dear Fabian, Abby, family and friends, I was deeply saddened to hear that Mogg had passed away. I feel very fortunate to have worked at Dallington in an environment that was highly creative, child-centred and challenged traditional approaches to how children learn. Mogg's passion for education, helping children to expand their ideas and set high goals, was inspirational and greatly influenced my teaching style. Mogg was always elegantly dressed in black, except for one time that I recall, when we were having a favourite book character day. And Mogg introduced herself as the head teacher to prospective parents, dressed as a cross between Hilda Ogden and Mrs. Wishy-Washy, wearing fluffy slippers and holding a mop. Mogg's vision for Dallington began from wanting to provide the best education for her own children, and with dedicated long-term staff working alongside her, Vanessa, Annette, Hester, Jackie, Catherine and Sam during my time, many children were fortunate to experience and flourish in this environment. My thoughts are with you at this sad time. Love, Robin.
Amanda Squire. I attended Dallington for 2 happy years as a pupil before moving out of London with my parents for the countryside. 15 years later, I found myself fresh out of university and back at Dallington with a teaching job in lower nursery. I was 21, eager to impress, and had no real idea of what teaching was like. Surely it couldn't be that hard. After all, I had a degree and had read the EYFS, Early Years Foundation Stage. Not long into term, Mogg appeared in lower nursery with several prospective parents. I proudly asked one of the children to come and stick the correct date on the calendar. I can't remember exactly what date I told them to put on, but it was nowhere near the actual date that it was. Mogg let me carry on merrily putting on the wrong day of the week, date and month. Goodness knows what the parents must have thought. It was only later that I realised my mistake and sheepishly went to apologise to Mogg. "Don't worry," she said. "I knew you'd realise eventually." It was typical of Mogg not to draw attention to my mistake or to criticise or to make you feel bad. In my 2 years teaching at Dallington, I learnt so much, and her kindness and huge amount of knowledge and passion for education was inspiring. 14 years later, I'm still in the classroom, after a few dalliances with other jobs. And to this day, I still triple check the date every time I write it on the board or ask the children. Mogg, thank you for everything you've taught me all those years ago. I haven't forgotten.
This is from Jane Saylor, who was Jane Werner to us when she worked with us as a school secretary. Mogg, I have so many wonderful memories of working with you. You, amazing, so generously kind, funny lady. And like all the children at Dallington, you gave me, as school secretary, simply the best time. Remember how you used to come down to the office from a morning of teaching in middle school and hide under your desk? For some reason, the glass windows to your office always resembled London in the big smoke. I can't think why. Then there were the times when I'd be working away all morning in the office and I've got all my papers in neat piles ready for you on my desk. Enter Mogg from middle school and you'd say, "Look at you, you girl from Kent, all so neat and tidy." And you go along the front of my desk, ruffling up all the papers, and how we laughed together. But to see you at work in the classroom was just incredible. Wow. How you brought math to life through artwork and creative forms, fully engaging the children. Dallington will miss you forever, and you will always hold a special place in my heart. Watch out, school in the sky. You're about to employ one truly remarkable lady. I think there will be a certain right-hand man by the name of Evan joining you too.
Caroline Leonard née Dent, known as Caro, would like to say for Mogg, who came from Australia and is always in my heart. And this is from Dance Diana Hart, who taught dance for us for many years. Mogg was the first head teacher to take me on following setting up my own business, transitioning from a class teacher to an independent creative movement teacher. Working at Dallington was without doubt the most rewarding experience creatively of my 35-year career. The readiness of the children to express themselves through movement and the atmosphere of creative possibilities meant I looked forward to each session for the 12 years I worked at the school. Thank you, Mogg, for taking a chance on me.
Kay Redford, now Marshall, fondly known by all as Big Kate, as there were three other Kates in the nursery, all children. She was named by a child as Big Kate, and she was big compared to them. I will never forget Mogg's commitment, her perceptiveness, her ability to get straight to the point, her courage, her quirkiness, her strength, her wicked sense of humour, her laugh, her willingness to give this young Australian travelling teacher a chance, and her reaction when I asked, just the once, what her real name was. She touched many, many people who will remember her always. Rest in peace, Mogg. Nursery teacher, 1981 to 84.
Okay. This is from our lovely mate Sam Nichol, who was a teacher at Dallington in the 90s for 10 years. She went back to Australia to be nearer to her parents. And I guess we always missed her dreadfully once she'd gone, really. It is with great sadness that I write of my adored Mogg. She will always have a very special place in my heart, as she helped to make me the person I am today. While her core business was teaching children, she had a profound influence on the teachers around her, one of them being me. Sitting in the basement kitchen at Dallington after school every day with Mogg, I learnt what it was to be a teacher. Her passion and enthusiasm for all things education were, and still are, my inspiration. Although I left Darlington nearly 20 years ago, I still retell stories and Moggisms to my colleagues. Education was to be fun at Darlington, and it certainly was. We made 3D trees that went up to the roof, grew beans and banana trees, learnt cross-stitch, looked after snails, cooked meringues and marmalade, and went on overnight excursions to sleep on the Golden Hind. Individuality was encouraged, everything was possible. Seeking the right way to teach each child was at the core of how we worked. It was great fun and also hard work. Learning to read was fundamental as it set people free to be independent learners, the ultimate goal. Thankfully, when I was there, we did not have to do national testing. We did not need a national test to tell us what the students knew. We already had that information. We prided ourselves on creating a curriculum that was better than the compulsory national curriculum. And it was. Mogg was happy to resist. We were one out of only 3 schools in London who did not do the national testing. It took enormous courage and confidence to not follow the crowd. Her faith and direction was steadfast. And there's more. Over to Fred.
I will forever be grateful to Mogg for letting me follow my passions. She encouraged me to be innovative and supported me to think things through. Mogg nurtured and challenged at the same time, giving me a quest for clarity of purpose and a depth of understanding that is necessary to make real change. She really set me up to succeed in my future career as the reflective balance she instilled in me as maybe a better educator and school leader. She is a school leader now, obviously. Never afraid to play devil's advocate, we would discuss things for hours, and there were times I will cherish. Working at Darlington was a very important time in my life. I really grew up over the years at Darlington, and I feel so lucky to have had Mogg to guide me and look after me through the years. Being a part of the Darlington family was more than a job. I really do feel part of the Hercules family. We were lucky enough to share some wonderful times in Melbourne after I returned to Sydney, and holidays in London will never be the same without Mogg and a cup of coffee at the table in the basement. Mogg's mantra was to treat the children as if they were your own. And this is now the mantra I instill in my school. While this sounds simple enough, in other schools this is not possible. Knowing each child and each family makes for better education. And I feel like I received the best education of all being a teacher at Darlington. Mogg will always be my other mother, my mentor and my inspiration. But she is not gone. Her wisdom, her pursuit of excellence, her energy, enthusiasm and innovation, her courage and bravery will always be part of me. I thank Abby and Fred for sharing their amazing mother with me.
Leslie Quinton, a Darlington teacher. It was with great sadness that I heard of Mogg's passing, and I would like to send my condolences to you, Abby, and the rest of the family. Mogg will always hold a special place in my heart, and I'm so sorry that I will not be able to attend her funeral today. I would be forever grateful to Mogg for giving me the opportunity to teach at Darlington School after recently arriving in the UK from South Africa. There was always such positive energy in the school, and teaching there was always such fun. I will cherish those memories always. My thoughts are with you all today. Sending much love.
And Beacon Kerbishley, teacher and deputy head. The first time I met Mogg was a memorable one. I just finished university and was young and naive, but full of enthusiasm for teaching in a child-centred way. I never imagined I would find a school that did that and more, that broke the mould and was truly progressive. I should have known if my interview was anything to go by. I made an embarrassing and spectacular entrance, dressed in my neat interview skirt. I arrived by falling down the red steps of the school. Mogg opened the door, took one look at me and said, "Are you an Aries?" Being a little clumsy is apparently a trait. To which I replied in a slightly confused way, "Yes." "Do come in," she said. Some of you may know that Mogg was an Aries too. She was also one of the most perceptive people I've ever met. The rest of the interview went something like this. I was asked to go and join a group, so I sat on the floor and played with the children, with Mogg quietly watching. She then nudged me and said, "Hey, you can go now." I was offered the job that evening, and my journey at Darlington began. What I've learned as a teacher is immeasurable. Mogg supported me throughout, and I hold on to her words of wisdom. The minute you the minute you think you know everything as a teacher is the minute you should stop, she told me once. I know I have so much more to learn, so I promise to keep learning, Mogg. I'd like to introduce Mogg's brothers, Stuart and Richard.
You're the old one? Yeah. Sure. Thank you. Yeah. We've talked about Mogg a lot. I'd just like to thank you people for supporting Mogg. Without you, she'd be on her own, so I don't know what to say. It's all been said about her, other than how she got her name, Mogg. Does anybody know? Well, as a young boy, I couldn't pronounce Maureen, hence the Mogg. That's all I could say. Thank you so much.
Look, we can't improve on what you've all said, the tributes to Mogg. She was our sister, true, in blood, but you're her family too. It's really heart-rending, to stand here and say thank you all. Mogg was an enigma, though, so like Dave said before, she could cut the most robust person to pieces with a few well-chosen words.
I used to hate that.
Yeah. but she also possessed a deep reservoir of pathos and understanding. She knew what to say when necessary. And that, that means the world to everybody, I think.
See, Richard knows words like Mogg.
Well, it comes from a bricklayer, that's it.
Yeah. But it used to annoy me that I'd be talking for half an hour and she'd just say 3 words and it meant all of that.
Yeah, same thing. One of the funny things I've got to tell you, when my wife and I landed in London in 1968, we'd been married for 6 weeks because we spent our time on the ship coming over. We had nowhere to go. Mogg was living in Gore Road, opposite Victoria Park there, and she invited us to stay with her for a while. So we went round, knocked on the door with all our luggage. Mogg opened the door, and she took one look at Sandra and she said, "Well, thank God you're at least wearing mascara." So again, we just both like to say thank you all for your support and your tributes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I should say, hello, thank you. I should say, without the backing vocals, this needs a big finish, this one, so I need your help. There's a really simple hook. You'll get it. Just when you get it, just sing on, please. I wrote this one. It just came out the Sunday after Mum died, like this. There was no, I didn't have to try. It just came out. I really hope it's the right song for us all to share and sing together.
Why
Grace. Well, I'm going to invite you now to stand with me. Please stand. At Evan's funeral, the family wanted us to say the Lord's Prayer, and family wanted us to do that today as well, as a way of recognising Evan in today's celebrations. So we're going to say the prayer that's in the service sheet. We pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. We're going to sing together Over the Rainbow. The shortest sentence in the English language, if you know the answer to that question, it's a good pub quiz question. The shortest sentence in the English language is 2 words from the Bible. The 2 words, Jesus wept. And they're words that describe Jesus at a funeral, the funeral of his dear friend Lazarus. And Jesus, God himself, wasn't aloof from suffering or from death. He weeps with us. But following his tears, he says these words. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. And that is what gives us hope on this occasion. And that's the hope we can look to. There is eternal life. And I'm going to invite us now, just in the silence, to gather round Mogg's body in this building and to say our goodbyes, but also my longing is that we know that hope of eternity surrounding our heart at this time. So I just in a moment of quiet, I'd invite us to say our goodbyes to Mogg, to thank Mogg, and I'm going to pray by name for the family. Heavenly Father, as we commit Mogg's body, as we say our goodbyes, as we thank her for all that she is and all that she's given, we pray particularly at this time for Abby and Fabian. We pray for Sonny and Eloise. We pray for Maria and Charlie and Kaya. We pray for Stuart and Richard. We ask that they will know comfort in their time of mourning, comfort from us, love from us, that they'll know happy memories, that they'll know your joy of eternity. And we pray, therefore, for your peace that passes understanding to surround their hearts and lives. And the blessings of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be with us now and always, we pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to release two white doves. The first one is for Mogg, and the second one is for Evan. Yeah? So whenever we're ready, I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3.